Hi, I'm Gary White, Channel 6, Central Kentucky Television. I'm here with State Senator Jimmy Higdon, who's with the 14th District, which includes Marion County and Nelson County in our viewing area, but actually kind of incorporates a large area, right? Going from all the
from Casey County all the way to Jefferson.
Yeah. And we are here for a legislative update. It's summer. Oh, actually, school's on now, but it's still summertime, and it's going to be a little while for the regular session. But there's the possibility of a special session that we want to touch upon, and just also, even though you're not actually officially in session, government still goes on all year long, right?
It does. We're in what we call right now, Gary, the interim. We start that in June, and every committee that meets that we have, every committee meets jointly. The House and Senate committees meet jointly once a month in Frankfort to discuss issues that we'll be addressing next year. So a lot going on. There's a lot of discussion right now about the budget and the pension, and the governor has made the comment that he will call a special session, and his original comments were that he would call a special session for tax reform and pension reform. He's now that's kind of been modified with the this pension reform is such a big task that I think the decision right now leans toward just having a special session on pension reform. And we have a big meeting coming up on August the 28th in Frankfort. I think that meeting's at 1 o'clock, and it will be well attended. It's the PFM group. That's who we hired. We put in the budget 2 years ago to hire a group to look at our pensions from top to bottom, and look at where they're at. How did we get there? And also to make recommendations to the General Assembly on steps to dig out this hole that we're in. And we're before we change the assumptions, we'll talk about that in a minute, we were about $34 billion underfunded. But anyway, that PFM group that we hired, they're going to make their final report on August the 28th in Frankfurt. And they will kind of lay the groundwork, they're going to make recommendations for steps that they see that we need to take to solve our pension crisis in Kentucky. Now, it's only recommendations. This is, I think everything's on the table, but they will make recommendations, and we'll take that and look at it and try to come up with a plan that protects those who are already drawing benefits, and that is fair to current employees, state employees, and come up with a plan. And maybe it could even affect future employees, but we just have to come up with something that work on a plan that's sustainable, and it will also include a huge commitment going forward to repay this debt that we owe on these pensions. And we've been working on this for several years, and credit to Governor Bevin. He's taken the bull by the horns and has made an effort, like I said, the calling of a special session to deal with this issue. So if we have that PFM meeting August the 28th, probably have a lot of discussion through the month of September, and probably sometime in October have a special session that deals only with pensions. Now, the other part of the subject that he talked about was tax reform. I think, right now it looks like we'll do pensions. We'll see what our obligations are. We'll do our budget. Next year's a budget session. We'll do our budget and see what if we can find any additional money in our budget to pay for these additional commitments that we make to the pension system to dig out this hole. And then from there, we'll look at tax reform. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. So hopefully when they get that report at the end of the month, there'll be a possible way to finally rectify the situation for the pensions.
Again, it's a recommendation by a third party, somewhat I guess a neutral party, so to speak, that's come to do, you know, we've hired them and they've come and they've looked, they've visited all the pension systems, they've looked at past performance, and they've looked at the financials of all the systems, and you know, like I said, they've given us, this will be our third report. They've given us 2 reports already, and this third report will be recommendations. And like I said, they're simply that, they're recommendations, but it is kind of a, I guess, a roadmap for what some of the things that need to be done to get our pensions back to where they are sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll wait and hear about the special session for that. Yeah.
You know, that'd be one of those things that we'll hear a lot about. It'll be a very important issue to a lot of people.
Absolutely. Okay. And also another issue that there's a lot of talk about that needs to be dealt with is the opioid and drug situation. Are you hearing a lot of discussion on that as well?
It is, Gary. That's probably, you know, our number one financial issue is pensions, and the opioid addiction is probably the number one public health issue that we have, and it's a huge issue, and just about every family is affected one way or the other by opioid addictions. And you know, it just it's really frustrating. You know, we've passed so much legislation to deal with the opioid issue or crisis, and seems like everything we do only makes it worse. And so, you know, to sit here and tell you that I have the answer, I don't. It's a huge problem. I was glad to see that the president, you know, address issues, says that we have a crisis in our country, which he's correct. We have a crisis in our country. We have a crisis in our state. You know, we have a crisis right here in my Senate district, and it's an issue that has to be dealt with. And like I said, we'll talk a lot about that during this session. We're talking a lot about it during the interim. But to tell you that there's a silver bullet out there that's going to solve this problem, that, you know, we've tried locking them up. That doesn't work. We're working on you know, trying to have recovery solutions available where people can go to recover, to seek, you know, medical help, and to rid themselves of this addiction. And a lot of times that rehab works, but it doesn't work for everybody. So, and you know, we're looking at you know, one of the things that you know, we talk, and this will probably get us into our next question, is about cost of incarcerating people. Our budget for corrections, you know, the number of people we have in jail in Kentucky just continues to grow at a pace that's and it's one of those issues, one of those items in the budget that you have no control over. You know, we've tried to limit our jail population, and we did for a short time. We tried to limit our jail population at about 20,000 inmates, and you know, and it's ballooned over the last year and a half, 2 years, from 20,000 to over 23,000 inmates. And yeah, it's costing the state a lot of money. It's costing the counties a lot of money, and you know, and again, we're trying to look at some sort of rehab and some sort of, I guess, programs for those who are addicted, rather than house them in the county jails and in the state prisons. And so we'll be hearing a lot about that in the next session. And again, it's an issue that's tough to legislate. You know, and I'll give you an example, Gary. It's like squeezing a balloon. You tighten down on one part of the balloon, or squeeze it here, and it pops out over there. You know, several years ago, the big deal was the pill mills and problems with prescription drugs. And we passed legislation to crack down on that, make it more difficult to get prescription meds. And what happens, heroin and cocaine are very cheap, and so we see people, turning to that, going away from prescription drugs and going to the harder stuff. And now we see all these overdoses because it's laced with fentanyl and other ingredients that is very unpredictable. So we solve a problem, or try to solve a problem, and we create a new problem. So again,
because the addiction is probably because they're addicted to something.
That's true, and to tell you that I have a solution, I don't. I continue to be committed to work to find a solution, to work with other legislators to try to do something to help families and help Kentucky rid itself of this scourge that we're dealing with, this opioid addiction.
Now, we had talked about the prisons and such. There has been talk of what used to be the Marion Adjustment Center.
That's correct.
Possibly reopening. That closed a few years back.
That's correct.
And they've been talking about that now for, seems like a year or two or what have you.
They have.
Yeah. Is that going to happen?
And that's probably one of the most popular questions I get, and I ask the administration, probably every other month, what's the status of Marion Adjustment Center? And for up until probably the first year, Gary, every time I asked for the past year, they would tell me that they were in negotiations. And if you noticed in the news not long ago, they had that the governor put out a RFP, or they were going to do a personal service contract to hire a legal firm to draft a contract with CCA. Correction Corporation of America, who owns Marion Adjustment Center, along with Lee Adjustment Center and Otter Creek. And so, there's the rumors, are out there that the state is going to negotiate with at least one of the private prisons and open it back up, because right now we have a real issue. Like I said, our prison population has ballooned to over 23,000 inmates, and we simply have prison overcrowding, and that's an issue when you have jails that are actually, we've heard of jails that are actually sleeping in shifts. Some people have the cot for 8 hours, and then they have to get out, and another inmate takes their place and gets to sleep for 8 or 10 hours. And so that's not good, and we've had reports of inmates sleeping on floors where they have overcrowding. So it's an issue we have to deal with. Like I said, the governor's office is dealing with that, and when I hear something, I'll let you know, Gary. But right now, when I ask, they're still negotiating. That's their answer.
Now, also in the northern part of Nelson County, there's the talk for a Isaiah House, which is in Willisburg, opening up a facility in Chaplin.
Right.
And we've done a report on the story on that, and some people, as we reported on that, the feedback we were getting, some people were not pleased with the possibility of that opening there. Have you heard any feedback on that?
I have not. I am familiar with the Isaiah House. When I had Washington County in my Senate district, the Isaiah House was in northern Washington County in Willisburg. They've had some issues from time to time, but from the last many years, they've been good corporate citizens, and there's been no issues. I've not heard any negative feedback from Chaplin, our residents in Chaplin, but I do know that they are in the process of buying a facility and opening a facility there now. I don't know where they're at as far as that being final. I've not heard that. I have been made aware that they have applied to put a facility there.
Right. Well, also, over the past several days in the national news, there's been some discussion with, you mentioned the president talking about something with the crisis what's going on with racial issues in the area. And now the governor has weighed in as well, because before he was talking about the statue of Jefferson Davis in Frankfurt, before saying that he thinks that should be removed, and now kind of saying it shouldn't. Have you heard any feedback on all that stuff going on?
You know, I have not, and again, that's probably something that we'll address in the next legislative session. There'll be a lot of debate on where we go with Jefferson Davis. And so, you know, I look forward to that. And again, you know, that's been talked about for years, probably almost ever since I've been in the General Assembly. Jefferson Davis has always been an issue, and that issue has always been come up. So, you know, we will be debating that, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of feedback on that.
Do you have an opinion on it?
Like I said, we're looking at that issue, and you know, it's there's a lot of good points on you know, about the removal of Jefferson Davis. You know, but again, I want to see what the proposal is, and you know, there's more to it than just removing him, and you know, so I want to look at the entire issue, not just the removing him. You know, where does he go? You know, is that the only thing that we have in the Capitol that needs to be addressed? You know, there's a big picture. It's not just Jefferson Davis. There's a lot of issues we need to deal with on this particular topic. So, like I said, I'm sure during this next legislative session that will be an issue that we'll talk about quite a bit.
Now, also, even though session hasn't started, some bills are already being filed.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been hearing anything about some of the major bills that you're looking at for next year?
You know, there's always a lot of legislation that's pre-filed, and they typically make the news. I know there was one in the news this morning. There's a couple of holidays. I think there's a Confederate Memorial Day that came up, a bill to take that off the state calendar as an official day. I never knew that was in there. Somebody brought that up to remove that. You know, I've got a piece of legislation that I'm working on. It was Senate Bill 16 last year that involves expungement, and you know, we passed an expungement bill, and I think it's been very successful. A lot of Class D felonies that people had committed, you know, very low level felonies that after a period of time with a clean record, they can go back and have them expunged. I think we expunged or made it about 60. I think it's 62 felony offenses that we made that were expungible. And you know, when I say that, it's still at the discretion of the judge whether or not these felonies are expunged. And it's a long process. It's a $500 fee, and you know, if there's any victims, they have to be notified. And so if there's a victim out there, somebody that committed a crime, and they object to them getting an expungement, then obviously they wouldn't get an expungement. But anyway, there's 62 offenses, and that's been very successful. There's a few more I'd like to add to that, and I'll be filing legislation to, you know, there's about 7, 8, 10 more Class D felonies that are, again, they're kind of very low rated, non-violent, non-sexual in nature, and no crimes against children that I'd like to see, you know, added to the expungement list.
Okay. Anything else that we need to let people know is going on with you and in Frankfurt at this time?
Well, we got an eclipse next week.
Yes, that's true.
Everybody and their mama knows about that. But you know, I'm getting a lot of feedback on the pension issue. You know, and I look forward to people discussing that with me. And there's a lot of people affected. You know, current retirees. You know, they're concerned about it. Current state employees and teachers are concerned about it, and not hearing much concern about future hires because a lot of them are not sure who they are, whether they're going to work for the state in the future. But that is certainly a big issue, and you know, a lot of talk about transportation issues. You know, we have a need for more roads, and you know, roads are very important for not only for economic development, but for safety of our constituents. You know, everybody needs a good, safe road to drive on. So those issues are being talked about too, and priorities of road projects. And of course, you know, economic development. You know, we have a lot of job openings in this area of Kentucky, which is very good. That there's jobs being created, but it creates challenges of making sure that we have a trained workforce to be able to take these jobs that are becoming available, and you know, from my understanding, they're good paying jobs. So we have that challenge also. You know, it's like I said, plenty of challenges and a lot of good things happening in Kentucky, but again, a lot of challenges.
Again, I'm talking with State Senator Jimmy Higdon, and this has been Gary White for Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television.
Thank you, Gary.